Welcome to State of the Offense. Today we will look into the matchup of the Raiders and the Bills. Week 1 was a solid week for Jimmy Garoppolo against a solid Broncos defense. 20 out of 26 with the 7.7 yard per attempt is pretty solid. Jimmy G also threw 2 touchdowns and an interception. Garoppolo's performance placed him in a tier of quarterbacks between the 10 and 12 range with 24 fantasy points scored. The trip to Buffalo is a little bit tougher than the trip to Denver was last week. Jakobi Meyers is also out, and the Bills will assign Tre'Davious White to cover Davante Adams. I expect a tougher week for Jimmy G against the Bills. He is my quarterback 26 in week 2. The rushing attack for the Raiders did not get going against the Broncos. The Raiders as a team only averaged 2.1 yards per attempt. Josh Jacobs did receive a very healthy 79.7% snap share, so his holdout in the preseason did not limit his workload at all. When it was all said and done, Josh Jacobs only scored 8 fantasy points, which placed him in a tier of running backs in the 32 to 34 range. I expect somewhat better results from Josh Jacobs because of the Jakobi Meyers injury. We'll put all the playmaking responsibilities on Jacobs and Adams this week. Jacobs is my running back 16. Jakobi Meyers had a 29-point game going before he got hurt in Denver. Hunter Renfrow will now step into the wide receiver 2 role for the Raiders. Renfrow only played 22% of the snaps in week 1, and I'm starting to wonder if he's a viable starting wide receiver in the NFL. Davante Adams took a secondary role to Meyers last week, and he ended up scoring only 12 fantasy points. He's facing one of the better cornerbacks in the game in Tre'Davious White, so I don't expect a huge performance. One thing in Adams and Renfrow's favor is that the Raiders are 9-point underdogs, so they may have to pass because they will likely be playing from behind. Davante Adams is my wide receiver 15 for week 2, and Hunter Renfrow is my wide receiver 47. The Raiders only threw 1 pass to a tight end last week. Austin Hooper caught it for 20 yards. Rookie second-round pick Michael Mayer had a healthy snap share of 49.2%, but he was not featured at all, which was disappointing. The lack of interior offensive line talent on the team means the Raiders have to use a lot of tight end formations to try to run block. I rank Hooper as my tight end 40, and I'm leaving Mayer unranked until I see that the Raiders are willing to put him in the game plan. Josh Allen had a tough week 1 against a very talented Jets defense on Monday night. Taking 5 sacks and committing 4 turnovers was too much. He had another fumble that the Bills recovered too. The Raiders have talent on defense, but without Chandler Jones, they are missing their second best defensive player. Max Crosby will be a handful for Spencer Brown at right tackle. The Bills have a decisive talent advantage in the receiving options versus the Raiders secondary. The Bills have the 3rd best matchup in the passing game this week. Because of this and the fact that the Bills are playing at home against a lesser defense than the Jets, I expect Josh Allen to have a great game. Josh Allen is my quarterback 2 in week 2. Bills running backs averaged 3.8 yards per carry last week against the Jets. James Cook played 59.4% of the snaps, which was nice, but he's not clearly better than either Latavius Murray or Damian Harris. The Bills' backfield is deeper now than it was before, but I still don't believe in them for fantasy football. Part of the reason for this is that they play 3 guys who have similar talent levels, and the other reason is that the Bills have the number 27 offensive line in the NFL. McGovern and Torrance are not dominant guards yet, so the Bills' inside running game is work in progress. James Cook is the only Bill that I have ranked this week, and he's my running back 35. With the addition of Dalton Kincaid to the starting lineup, the Bills no longer have to worry about the lack of a 3rd wide receiver. Stefon Diggs was very productive against a very talented secondary last week. 10 catches for 102 yards and a touchdown is great against a team like the Jets. The matchup against the Raiders is a lot more favorable. Stefon Diggs is my wide receiver 2 this week. Gabe Davis played like he normally does. A few catches with a strong yards per catch average. I think that there's a big play waiting for Davis this week which will raise the ceiling. Gabe Davis is my wide receiver 31 for week 2. The Bills' base look is a two tight end formation with both Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid on the field. Knox played 84.1% of the snaps, and Dalton Kincaid played 79.7% of the snaps. Josh Allen threw the ball to them a combined 8 times. Knox scored 5 fantasy points and Kincaid scored 6. The Raiders' safeties are average, so both have the potential for strong games this week. Dawson Knox is my tight end 11 this week, and Dalton Kincaid is my tight end 18. If you like today's coverage of the Raiders-Bills game, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.